Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a new video. So I forget how recently, but I did a 2028 Democratic primary candidate tier list. So I figured that, Democrats are going to have a more open primary than Republicans. The Republican primary probably will come down to one person. I think you know who it is, but for the sake of suspense, I shan't tell. But yeah, we really know who the Republican nominee is going to be. It's not it's not really that much up for contest, but I figured we might as well do a video on it to be, you know, uh, consistent. Um, to explore who Republicans can nominate, and how terribly that can go. So we have these candidates. It's not made by me. It's made by Centennial Elections on Twitter. I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. I don't even think she follows me, so I have no guilt for saying I don't know who the fuck that is. It's been 7 seconds. I can say that, YouTube. So yeah. So as a baseline for this is about where I'd put it. So the F plus category, we also have a her exceptionality, which exceptionality not in like exceptional superseding every other candidate, but like in being the exception where she would lose a shit ton of these states that no other candidate could lose. We have F plus, which is the baseline for everyone. I think you know who her exceptionality is. The exception. I think you know who that is. But these are like even the worst candidate could probably scrape together win in these states. Noticeable exceptions are Maine second and Alaska. Texas and Florida would be close even with the worst candidates, but I feel like they're trending Republican enough that even with a terrible candidate, they wouldn't be that competitive. Plus Kansas, though Kansas does seem a little bit stagnant. It voted for a Democrat for governor, but like at some point you have to recognize that was a local race, and I think the rural areas are just enough to pad any Republicans' margin. And the Rust Belt, for the most part, especially the southern Rust Belt, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, seems to be shifting Republican at a consistent pace. So I think that's probably the baseline for most Republicans. D plus is more Republican leaning swing states, North Carolina, Arizona, plus Maine second and Alaska, which I think the worst Republicans could lose. If you're in D plus, you can probably win these states. Arizona, actually, maybe North Carolina would be the hardest one. But I think if you're in this tier, you can win Alaska, Maine, and probably Arizona. C plus is where you start to be a viable candidate electorally. You can win Nevada and Pennsylvania, which gives you the presidency, plus Michigan, which can expand your margin. This is different to the Democratic primary tier list. Where I thought the Democrats didn't have that many good candidates. I thought that they suffered from a lot of issues. Republicans do have some pretty bad candidates, but I feel like for the most part, they have quite a few candidates that can hold together the base while expanding it to moderates. So this is different. C plus is where Republicans can start winning the election. B plus is you finally win the last few swing states. Wisconsin, Georgia, which I think will be some of the hardest wins for Republicans long term, just because I think Michigan and Pennsylvania are much easier. Um, Wisconsin, I would say, is the hardest one here. Though Georgia, I do think Republicans have viability in long term. This idea that it's just resigned to being a D plus 20 state within the next 5 years is completely opposed to any facts that we have from this state. What we've seen is that even though it has trended left compared to the national environment, it seems somewhat stagnant. And somewhat like a quintessential battleground state. And I do feel like Republican margins will hold enough in the suburban areas, even if they go down a little bit, and will improve enough in the rural areas that this state has the potential to vote Republican again, especially in 2028, where these trends in the Atlanta suburbs won't have sped up to like this mystical future where Fayette County is D plus 50. So that's probably, these two states are probably the furthest um, from Republican out of these seven quintessential battleground states. But A plus, you begin expanding into states that Trump didn't win. and states that aren't considered battleground states. You have New Hampshire, Minnesota, the two closest Democrat wins, besides for Nebraska second, which is also here. Um, of 2024. We also have a few long shot states like New Mexico and New Jersey, which shifted pretty Republican. New Mexico would be the hardest one out here because I do feel like New Jersey is trending Republican enough that if you're going to win a state like Minnesota, you're going to win New Jersey as well. So New Mexico is on the fringe between A plus, which by the way, these aren't like F plus like the great. It's F and above. That's what the plus signifies. But you know, this is around where the point that you have to be at the very top of A tier to win it, but I could see someone in A tier conceivably winning here, and then S is like the perfect candidate. Virginia and Maine, and then I included Illinois and New York kind of as a joke. I, I mean, New York and Illinois trends could signify that, but we do have to win until 2026. And even 2025, we have some elections in New York. I don't think we have anything in Illinois, but who cares about Illinois? Fuck Illinois. We can wait at least until 2025 to see if New York trends will continue into the second Trump era. So, anyways, without further ado, let's get into these candidates. We have quite a few. We start off with Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. He isn't that well liked among the Republican base, but he still is relatively tolerable. So far, he hasn't really had to run a national campaign. He ran a pretty hard fought campaign in 2018, but most of his baggage against Trump really appeared in 2020 and 2021. And in spite of that, he still won quite overwhelmingly in 2022, though it was against Stacey Abrams. So, yeah, you do have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. It looks like he's inclined to run for Senate. In 2026. Of course, Democrats won't tell you that because they're still pretending that Ossoff Stan is the reliable source. If you didn't get that joke, have you ever been to New York City? Because if you have, you might have seen a homeless person screaming at you from the other side of the platform. A homeless person might be saying, "Convert to Catholicism," because I guess that's like, I mean, it's sad that that's the only thing that can hold them together. But my Catholic philosophy doesn't exactly derive from the homeless people yelling at me. Or they could say, "Give me money." It's like Ossoff Stan. Picture him as the exact same person yelling at you. "Oh, I have inside sources that Brian Kemp will actually resign and appoint Stacey Abrams to two Senate seats and governorship." Insane people are the only people who think that Kemp is more likely to run for president than Senate. I think he could run for both. Um, but I would say as of now, it's looking more likely than not that Brian Kemp is going to run for Senate. But if he foregoes that, I think he's fucked. We're going to assume that, he doesn't piss off the MAGA base and he runs for Senate. And then if he wins, runs for president. Because I feel like I've heard from some people that Trump is lining up to endorse Brian Kemp. So it remains to be seen, but I think Brian Kemp would be a mostly fine candidate. You'd get out the base. It does depend on his 2026 run, which will be his first like uber competitive election that he's in. I still think he's probably to the higher end of candidates. I'm especially weighing in his home state advantage in Georgia and his relatively good appeal to suburbanites. In picking him for B tier, but I could definitely see him doing a little bit worse. I could see him probably not doing a little bit better. I don't think he's a good enough candidate to win like New Jersey, maybe New Hampshire, though even so, that's kind of hard. We got Byron Donalds. I almost said Brian Don. I don't know why I said that. But we have Brian Donald. I just said it again. That's the point. I put it in my head. We have Byron Donalds. The representative from Florida's 19th, if I'm not mistaken, and also now front runner for Florida governor. Seems like his only real um, competition will be, funnily enough, Casey DeSantis. So I, I think he's probably going to be governor, but he's relatively well liked by the MAGA base. He doesn't exactly have too much crossover appeal. I mean, he's the Freedom Caucus type, but I feel like he's relatively likable. I- I- he mostly is a backbencher. Though he does incur the wrath of the Matt Walshes or etc. every time he opens his mouth. Um, and doesn't seek hail towards our glorious leader Ron DeSantis. But other than that, for the most part, he's stayed behind the scenes. Mostly been good on the issues and has a good voting record. And he's won his elections by a bit. And I think he does relatively well in 2026 for Florida governor. And I think he'd do relatively well for president. He wouldn't really be able to expand past the core seven swing states. I just don't think a Freedom Caucus type would be able to win a state like New Jersey or New Hampshire. But I feel like he would be good, around as good as Brian Kemp. Then we got Chris Christie, which I'm starting to realize there's quite a few horrible candidates. Besides for who I was thinking of, um, in this tier list, I've been scanning it, um, and I see actually two people who aren't going to come up for a while, but will come up eventually. That could be considered her exceptionality. So guess we'll have to add a plural to that. But we have Chris Christie, basically a woman. So nah, I'm kidding. But Chris Christie, relatively good candidate way back in 2012. I do think he would have beaten Obama, especially with the hurricane relief helping him. He won by a lot in 2013. That was literally his only appeal as a candidate in 2016. Um, he got crushed. He was kind of pro Trump, but then he realized that he had an opportunity to get himself more influence. Being the retired governor of New Jersey isn't exactly a lucrative position, so he started to grift towards the anti Trump right and even eventually towards the left. He kind of resembles Nikki Haley, except honestly, he might be worse. Um, I personally like him better than Nikki Haley. Um, And I think, I mean, I just don't think it's a realistic scenario where he's a Republican candidate. Like he's scandal plagued from Bridgegate, so he has no appeal to his home state. So then, who the hell is going to vote for him? Like the anti-Trump right is like 2% of the GOP. But in the case that he's nominated, I think he bleeds a lot with the base. Um, this isn't 2012. You can't just be like, "Oh yes, we are the intellectual right. We don't need populism. We don't need Ohio. We don't need Iowa. We'll just win with Virginia and I don't know, fucking Colorado or something." But I think he'd be towards the bottom of F tier. Um, it depends who the Democrat is, but I do feel like he might hold the baseline against the Democrat because I feel like he'd have some appeal to Democrats and independents. But I do feel like being realistic, he probably would be crushed. But I feel like he's not really a realistic candidate, so we'll just shove him in the bottom of F tier. He'd lose basically every major swing state, even to like fucking AOC or something. But he's not as bad as some of the other candidates. Then we have Chris Sununu. Not the best. He might be running for Senate. I still think he foregoes a Senate run at this point. Though I've heard conflicting things from uh, people affiliated with the GOP in New Hampshire. In nudge nudge. But if he runs for Senate, he uh, he would advise you to wait until my April prediction for Senate to see my opinions on his upcoming run. Subscribe, Chris. That's Chris Sununu telling you that, not me. That's Chris Sununu. But I think if he wins that Senate election, I, I mean, he has a lot of appeal to New Hampshire and like the moderate northeastern um Republican who votes for Democrats on the federal level. But I don't know how much appeal he would have to like the general populace. I mean, he has appeal in New Hampshire, but like does that translate to Wisconsin or Pennsylvania? Like this idea that the New Hampshire suburbs can be extrapolated 1-to-1 to like Loudoun County, Virginia. Like you really can't do that. And I don't think he'd do too good. I think if he could hold his own with the Republican base, he'd be okay. Um it's just I don't think he balances it as well as Brian Kemp does. So I think he'd be a C tier candidate because of that. He could definitely win an election. It's just it would be close. And especially since the Democrats don't have that great of a slate of candidates, like it really shouldn't be that close. But now we have Donald Trump. Um, I'm gonna shoot myself. This is like a joke, and the problem is people take it seriously. Like you'll never hear me say a bad word about Andy Ogles. But why did he propose that? It's a joke. It's a joke. The idea that Trump will run for a third term. Some people believe it. I'm sorry, but like it's a toddler. Like I want that thing, and I don't want it to go away. Like I get that Trump's a good president. Oh my, and I'm talking to like the Republicans who support him for a third term right now. If you're a Democrat, you can I guess skip forward 20 seconds in the video, but like he's a good president, okay, but like you can't just say, "Oh my God, I need good president forever." Like, no, you have to have like the basic sense of like a 5-year-old. Like, nothing lasts forever. Like, I don't know, you can't go to Disneyland for the rest of your life, little Timmy. Like, get a job. Like, no, he wouldn't run, but if he did run, he'd do okay. I think he'd probably run even with his 2024 performance. Maybe a little bit better since I think Newsom's going to be the nominee, which would be great for Democrats. And if Newsom's not the nominee, it's going to be someone worse. So he'd probably be around a B tier candidate, or maybe A in a good scenario. I feel like top of B tier, but he wouldn't be that great. It's just like he's been defined for 12 years straight by his opponents, and he's like an extremely controversial figure. So his floor might be high, but his ceiling is definitely low. Be hard for him to expand into too many of these Democrat leaning states. So now we have Trump Jr. Trump Jr. is a joke. The only reason he's being considered, not even by himself, he's declined to run, but the only reason he's being considered by anyone is, oh my God, we can beat Trump, but 4 years late. It's like the basic cope. It's like the most dumb base cope of like the left. Like, oh no, well if we couldn't beat Trump Senior, we can beat Trump Junior. Ha ha. This is the way that Kamala Harris is gonna have her landslide. Like, no, no, he wouldn't be a good candidate, but like that doesn't matter. He wouldn't run. But I don't think Trump Junior would do too great with independent. I mean, he's like not interested in running for office whatsoever. I'll slap him in C tier, but like he wouldn't be a great candidate. That's kind of obvious. But Doug Burgum, I mean Doug Burgum would do okay with independence. He's kind of from the Rust Belt, not really. I'm sorry, I don't consider North Dakota the Rust Belt. You can crucify me in the comment section for that. Oh no, North Dakota, which is obviously a plain state, isn't part of the Rust Belt. How dare he say that? Like, no. So he doesn't have appeal there. He's just like you pluck him out of obscurity because like, oh yes, moderate governor from Dakota will obviously win the election. Like the only reason anyone knows his name is because of the VP debate. Not VP debate. I mean, I guess you could call it the VP debate, but the VP question surrounding Trump. And I guess he also ran for president. But like, I mean, like I said, that was basically the VP debate. But I don't think he'd do great. I don't think he'd do great with the Republican base. And I mean, he's like a hedge fund. He's like a billionaire executive. Like he wouldn't have that much appeal to populace. So I feel like, I mean, I don't want to say D tier, but like I don't see him doing good in the Rust Belt. I just think he's more of like a return to the basic type of Republican, like the 2010, 2012 Republican that like, oh well, in an off year or in a race that no one cares about can win. It's like this idea that Kimberly Yee will somehow sweep Arizona because like I pick out candidate that won by a lot without any context behind them. and I say, "Wow, what an overperformer! Let's run for president." Like, no, that's not how politics works. I feel like he'd do okay, but I don't think he'd win because I just don't feel like he has enough appeal to the working class, the white working class, to win. Then we have Elise Stefanik. She's not the best electoral performance wise. She outperformed Trump, but she did underperform Zeldin as an incumbent. She's a bit of a backbencher, though she will be resigning eventually. I feel like she's waiting for the Florida 6th and Florida 1st special elections, which, by the way, a week from when you're seeing this video, make sure to subscribe. We will be streaming those 7 p.m. Eastern time, I think, or one of them 7 p.m., one of them's 8 p.m. But yeah, gonna be a big night. I don't think she'd do too great, but I do feel like she'd be able to have the basic appeal of a Republican, having independence on her side while having like not losing too much with the base. I'd say C tier, maybe, probably around there. And then we have Francis Suarez. This is like this is a repurposed 2024 list, obviously, but like with the dumbest people possible. Francis Suarez was the mayor of Miami. I think he still might be. Not sure about that. Uh, but like he's just a mayor of the of a blue city. I mean, it's like a Harris plus point two city, but when he won, it was like a Clinton plus 30 city that voted Republican down ballot. So I don't think he's that much of an overperformer. He's a backbencher. I feel like he'd do okay, but he did kind of run an anti-Trump campaign. Um, and not the best candidate, but I'd say not as bad as Christie. He could definitely define. He'd have an opportunity to define himself, but I don't think he'd define himself too positively. D tier, um, around there. And then Youngkin. I feel like Youngkin's one of the first candidates with a good amount of crossover appeal. Um, Youngkin, I don't know what his approvals look like. I think he's not the most popular. But he does have a decent amount of crossover appeal in Virginia. Um, 2021, he won in somewhat of an upset. Would definitely be more of an upset if you told someone in August you would win by two. Terry McAuliffe was favored to win by like five there. So it was a decent upset that he won, and that he carried Republicans to a majority in the state house and winning the lieutenant governor and attorney general elections at the same time. Now he's retiring in 2025. Or I guess he's already retired. I don't know how that works. He's not running for re-election. He's kind of retired at this point. He's just serving out like the last year in office. So he's gonna face a conundrum where it's going to be hard to last until 2028, maintain relevance, because like unless you have a good network with the party, it's hard to go from like governor, then wait 3 years, and then have another position. I do feel like he's relatively well liked by Trump, though, so I feel like he'll have his spot in the party when he retires, and I feel like he definitely does have some crossover appeal to independents and to moderates. I feel like he could cut into Democrats' margins in some of the bigger uh, Democratic leaning suburban counties, especially in places like Minnesota, New Hampshire, and New Jersey. I feel like he'd do better. Um, while I do feel like he maintains Republican appeal with the working class and would win a lot of the rural areas in Michigan, maybe not Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and I guess North Carolina that Republicans do well in. I feel like he's probably our first A tier candidate because I feel like he balances the different factions of the Republican Party quite well. So he do pretty good. Then we have Greg Abbott. He's fine. I don't think he'd do great, but I mean he's another one of those candidates. He won Texas by a lot, therefore he's a great candidate. Like no, um, though I do feel like he probably would end up winning. It would be narrowly so. So I feel like C tier. He's another one of those like generic kind of establishmentarian, kind of Trumpian candidates. Then we have J.D. Vance, the incumbent vice president. In case you didn't know, this was who I was alluding to. Virtually guaranteed to win the nomination. J.D. Vance, he didn't do that great in his 2022 Senate bid, but I do feel like one, he's definitely the closest to the Trumpian appeal, besides for Trump himself. But even by then, I mean, Trump's way too old in 2028 to run. But he's definitely the closest to the Trumpian appeal. After all, he's Trump's vice president. But I feel like he could also have an opportunity to reach out to more moderates, more independents. He explains himself well, and he's definitely a much more palatable candidate to the average suburbanite, the average moderate, than Donald Trump. I think he would stand a chance against the generic Democrat winning like Minnesota, New Jersey, New Hampshire, and a lot of my predictions I have him doing so just because the Democratic field is that bad. So I feel like he'd also be an A tier candidate. Move on now to Joe Lombardo, the governor of Nevada. If I'm not mistaken, he's actually not eligible to run. I would have to look that up though, to see where Joe Lombardo was born. Uh, but he uh, he ended up winning the Nevada gubernatorial election against Steve Sisolak. Um, after being the sheriff, he yeah, he was born in Japan, so I don't think he's eligible. But he won the Nevada gubernatorial election in a year that wasn't that great for Republicans, defeating an incumbent, a relatively unpopular incumbent, mind you, but still an incumbent governor. Um, only Republican in the country, only candidate in the country to defeat an incumbent governor. Um, all the way. I think the last time an incumbent governor was defeated was 2019. So that's a pretty big feat. Um, since haven't had an incumbent governor toppled, besides for him, even now since 2019, and we probably won't have another um, until 2026, depending on how the year goes. But a pretty big feat for him. He did relatively well in Clark County among Hispanics. I feel like he'd carry that appeal. He also is pretty pro-Trump, even for Nevada. Uh, he's once again this idea of palatability of a Republican candidate. Like he's beloved in Nevada. Most people approve of him. While even at the same time, he was telling people to vote none of these candidates in the 2024 primary against Nikki Haley and enthusiastically in support of Donald Trump. Like I think he'd also tie together that appeal well. It's we have to wait and see to see how strong his appeal is, but I definitely feel like he would sweep the 7 major swing states, and it depends on his appeal with suburbanites. But I also feel like he's a tough one. I'll give him the edge and put him in A tier, just because I feel like he's definitely a strong candidate for suburbanites. Though once again, he remains relatively untested. John James, this is another joke of a candidate. He's not running for president. He's a fucking representative. Um, in Michigan, he's also a slight underperformer in his House elections, but he did good in 2018 and 2020 in his runs for Senate. He's a relatively good candidate there. He's not the best on the issues, though I don't think that really would matter. Because he's held together the Trumpian base relatively well. He's not that disliked among them. He has some appeal to suburbanites, kind of, not really. So I don't think he'd be the best candidate, but he definitely would be like a middle of the road C tier candidate. Now we have Josh Hawley. It really depends. Hawley does have some unpopular stances, and he underperformed Trump. Though that was against Lucas Coons, the most overhyped Democratic candidate in existence. So take it with a grain of salt. But I don't think he'd do that great. He is definitely more of an evangelical type. He's not exactly a like I'd say someone like Tommy Tuberville or Bernie Moraine now to some extent, um, or the Indiana senator as Jim Banks are more of a Trumpian type, but I'd say Hawley a bit more of an evangelical type, though still Trumpy. I think he'd do good. I don't think he'd do exceptional. He's between B and C tier for me. I'll put him in B tier. I just don't feel like he'd have enough appeal to suburbanites to win any of the A tier states, but I think he'd do relatively well. Now we have Katie Britt. Katie Britt, she's not that great. She delivered a disastrous response to State of the Union. Definitely not as good as the senator she serves alongside with. Um, she's fine, but like at the same time, fine isn't the best for Alabama. At some point, like she's probably not going to be the best performer on any national level, and she remains untested in a national arena or even in a competitive race. The last time we had one of those in Alabama was nearly a decade ago. So I think she'd do okay, but nothing exceptional. Probably, I mean, I have too many people in C tier, but probably C tier. We have Kim Reynolds. She is relatively disliked by the Republican base due to being a horrible um, team player in the 2024 election. Um, yeah, I mean, I know we weren't winning Kentucky, but I still have a little bit of resentment towards her for leaving Karen out to dry while she was like going around and partying with Ron DeSantis in Iowa. Like, wow, playing both sides, we can still win this campaign around. Like, no. Um, the head of the RGA should not be doing that. Um, I forget who it is now, but they're probably much better than Kim Reynolds. She looks like she could face not really a tough reelection in the general, but at least some primary opposition, which could weaken her. I don't think she'd do the best with the Republican base, and I feel like she'd do around the D tier. Um, Probably not that great. Wouldn't win too many of the swing states, but I mean, she has like basic amount of suburban appeal and some Rust Belt appeal. Though once again, the 2022 performance was more an indication of the local red wave that hit Iowa than her performance. Now we have Kristi Noem. Um, Kristi Noem, what a wonderful candidate. And I'm kidding with that, of course. Kristi Noem is like she's not even good on the issues, which I could excuse. Like obviously, I think the dog scandal. It's kind of revolting what she did, but at the same time, it's like not going to change an entire campaign. That was always like a liberal fever dream. That yes, Kristi Noem will cost Trump the election. Biden will be real. No, um, but she's worked to liberalize the South Dakota legislature, or she worked. Now she's no longer in office, but she primaried out specifically more America First, more Freedom Caucus members, which it's South Dakota. At some point, you need more conservative people in the South Dakota legislature. She's also shot down quite a bit of their bills. I don't think that would change her in a general election too much, but I definitely don't think she's likable. Um, It does depend how she serves as a head of DHS, but I don't think she'd do good. I think she'd be D tier. I mean, once again, South Dakota, not really too much Rust Belt appeal. Um, and I just don't think that she'd be likable to the majority of Americans, especially after the dog. Then we have who I was scanning to see if she showed up, Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is a Democrat. I'm not even kidding. It's hilarious that the Cheneys have become Democrats, but like she has endorsed over relatively moderate, palatable Republicans. She has endorsed Democrats over them. She has become a Democrat. She has become a weapon for the establishment against Trump and Republicans. And the funny thing is, even amongst Democrats and moderate Republicans, she's hated. Liz Cheney, honestly, there's two scenarios. Either it's head to head with the Democrat and she loses every state except like three because Republicans just don't turn out or vote for the Democrat in spite. Um, or a third party candidate like RFK pops up out of nowhere, and then she just gets like 2% of the vote and RFK takes all the Republicans. Like she's just that hated among Republicans that she honestly rivals one of these other candidates. I honestly say she could be worse than the other candidate we're going to put in the the exceptionality tier. Just complete lack of appeal to the Republican base. complete neoconish philosophy, complete lack of regard for any of the policies that Republicans stand on. Like, it's just, you want to lose every state. Like, she would lose. She wouldn't even win Nebraska's third against a Democrat. Like, unless that Democrat were Jasmine Crockett, she would do terrible, just like abominable. So we have Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a relatively good candidate. He has some appeal to suburbanites and especially Hispanics, which could help him in a state like New Mexico, and probably puts Nevada and Arizona out of even the best Democrats to reach. I don't know how good he does. I don't know how great he would do with the average Rust Belt Republican or the average suburbanite. Though I feel like he'd do okay. Especially since he has become more Trumpian and more MAGA over the years. So I'd put him around A tier. I definitely think he'd have a appeal to Hispanics and moderates that the average Republican does not. So he's probably better than the rest. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think she's our first S tier. Marjorie Taylor Greene will unite a pan American coalition, Democrats, Republicans, Independents alike. She's exposing the truth in society to the average person. And she's beloved with the MAGA base. I've never heard anyone conservative say anything bad about her on Twitter before. And she's also well liked by Democrats. That's why she's planted in Georgia's 14th by them. But she's beloved by everyone, and I actually think that she could possibly win a state like Oregon or Colorado. Um, so yeah, she's probably the best candidate out of anyone on this list. Matt Gaetz, eh, I mean, he's an underperformer in Florida's first. I could also put him in S tier, but I feel like people wouldn't realize that MTG being there is a joke if I did that. Um, because the average Democrat who watches these videos is either, a smart person who can engage, but like 50% of you people are retards. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Democrats. There's what I'm saying there is that you're the smart one because you watched to this part of the video and didn't skip to the end. But Matt Gaetz is a historical underperformer. I mean, he's a good he has a good record on the issues, but like I do feel like some of the sex trafficking claims will surround him, even if for the most part they're exaggerated or unfounded. Um, I definitely do feel like he'd be a terrible candidate and probably would be F tier. Mike Lee, he's pretty good. I wouldn't call him a backbencher. Although I would say the majority of Republicans don't know who he is, but he's probably one of the only good things to come out of Utah. It's it's honestly kind of sad that I have to say that, but yeah, yeah. Somehow he's a conservative, and he won in Utah. Though he did face a significant primary challenge for Becky Edwards. Like the fact that she was the one to challenge him in 2022, just incredible. But he's probably not the best electorally speaking, but I do feel like he would hold together a lot of the Republican base. Perhaps expanded a bit into the Romney coalition. I mean, besides for like the Church of Latter Day Saints, I don't know who he would have appeal to. But I definitely feel like he is like the Trumpian conservative in Utah. He's probably not the best electorally, but I would say like C to B tier. I'll put him in B tier just because I feel like he's a little bit better. Mike Pence. Mike Pence is a bit more of an evangelical type. He definitely is strongly disliked by the MAGA base. But even if he wasn't, he definitely doesn't have that appeal that Trump had. Like he was never going to have the same populist appeal as like an establishmentarian who ran for governor of Indiana, nearly lost. People don't talk about that, but he wasn't going to have that same appeal that Trump had, even if he were the designated successor. But like, even though I will admit he was kind of screwed over. With the electoral certification stuff, like he really didn't have the power to do that. The tour of like insulting Trump and insulting the Republican Party that he's gone on, over the last 4 years has ruined any appeal whatsoever he would have to Republicans. So he'd be our third F tier candidate. Um, he'd hemorrhage with the base. He'd do okay. He wouldn't be as bad as the exceptions, or even S tier cat. Sorry, but not as bad. How dare I insult Marjorie Taylor Greene? But he wouldn't be that terrible. It's just he wouldn't do particularly well in any election. Then we have Mike Pompeo. I don't know why he's here. I, I don't even know that much about him. But he's just like a cabinet official. I'm not sure if he betrayed Trump or not. I'm not gonna base that off of this, but like he's just a backbencher, and I don't think anyone actually likes him or knows who he is. So I'm gonna put him in D tier. Like if I don't know who he is, then no one knows who he is, or if they know who he is, it's probably not for the best reasons. We have Nikki Haley, obviously the other one in her exceptionality. Nikki Haley would be the death of the GOP. Like Liz Cheney, obviously she wouldn't run for the GOP nomination. If she ran, it would be specifically to kill the GOP. But Nikki Haley, she wouldn't be trying to kill the GOP, and she would still destroy the GOP. She is that bad of a candidate. She's a betrayal of every value that the GOP holds dear. She's a neocon. She's like just the way she explains herself, like listening to her rallies and watching her speak, like Department of Offense, like the same repeated metaphors. Like, oh, when I was in South Carolina, there was a big discussion about the flag. Oh, when you little babies, you don't know about the Confederate flag, but we had to have a heart to heart. Like she thinks that the people listening to her are 12-year-olds. Like she talks down to the American people because she's an elitist and an establishmentarian. But she takes that to the extreme, and even any of the appealed suburbanites that she has, like she's just a complete gaff machine. Like the Civil War was not about slavery, and the Department of Offense. Like, do you not understand why people voted against Bush? And like the coalitions have evolved, and candidates like Nikki Haley. And I kind of didn't explain this for some people like Liz Cheney because it's kind of obvious, but even Nikki Haley, who she's going to turn into Chris Christie. I'm calling it now. She's been stuff from Trump's administration, thank God, and she's just going to turn into an anti-Trump voice in the crowd. But like, she's a complete betrayal of the Trump base. And when you betray the Trump base, just ask Deborah Kerr how that goes, or ask Joe O'Dea how that goes. Like, it doesn't end well. And for the most part, we don't have too much evidence of that because they don't win primaries. It's weird. Nikki Haley only won one primary in an open primary state and a D+30 state, when more people turned out to vote in the Republican primary than the Democrat primary. I wonder why that was, but she'd be a terrible candidate. Yeah. Um, Ron DeSantis. DeSantis isn't that great electorally. I mean, he won in 2022, but like at this point, the Republican base doesn't love him. I like him, though a lot of his debates with Trump, a lot of the back and forths there, he's for the most part been good. Like he's been trying to push the party to the right, and Trump has stonewalled him. Part of it is revenge, which I don't love about Trump. But I feel like not for much fault of his own. DeSantis would lose a lot of his appeal. Though I do feel like he would end up winning. I feel like there'd be a lot of diehard Trump Republicans that wouldn't turn out for him, or at least would be harder to get on board. And I feel like his appeal to like the average suburbanite as more of a further right candidate would be a bit hard. I think he wins, but by the skin of his teeth. Definitely center of seat here. They have Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She's relatively good Arkansas governor. I think former White House press agent. During Trump's first term, but she's relatively good. Not eh, not really tested at a national scale. But for the most part, I think she'd do okay. Wouldn't have too much appeal. She'd have some appeal among suburbanites, but not too much compared to the average Republican. But I think she'd do okay. be able to hold the Republican base together. I think she's B tier rather than C tier. Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a good candidate. He underperformed a lot in Texas, but that's more personal unpopularity in Texas. And even so, that really didn't matter. I, I don't. He's an unlikable person. I mean, I like him, but like the average American doesn't. But he's relatively good on the issues. And he has a lot of the MAGA base appeal. I'm not. I'm not sure how he'd do. I'm inclined to put him in D tier just because of that unlikability problem. But I feel like if he could solve that, he'd definitely be a good candidate. Though I'm not sure. It definitely depends. He is an underperformer, so that's something to keep in mind. But I'm not sure if that would correlate to a national election. And then Tim Scott, we're gonna blast through these remaining ones. Tim Scott, kind of a joke. Senator from South Carolina. Uh, Great. He's better than Lindsey Graham. Um, he do okay. Probably D tier though. I do feel like he probably wouldn't have that much appeal among the Republican base, and he's way too neoconish. Um, Tom Cotton, he's weird. He's like MAGA, but also like holding Blood Feast. He do okay though. He wouldn't do great. Tucker Carlson. I mean, he's definitely uber populist, but at the same time, he's definitely not poised to appeal to the majority of Americans. D tier. Vivek Ramaswamy. Terrible, terrible, horrible, bad. Um, D tier. And then Will Hurd, bad, 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 bye, bye, F tier. There we go. Yeah, I sped through those last ones because I looked at the time, and this video is 45 minutes long. I did not plan that. I don't try to make my videos this long. I'm sorry. Please don't. But anyways, thank you for watching. Um, this has been a fun one to make. I'm just gonna leave Marjorie Taylor Greene at the top of the tier list there. You people can criticize me for that, but yeah, this has been a great fun video. It's not gonna matter. JD Vance is gonna be the nominee easily. Ha ha ha. Sucks for you, Nikki Haley supporters and Will Hurd and Chris Christie supporters. I don't think any of those people exist anymore, but yeah, or they do exist, and the Democratic Party would vote for fucking Jasmine Crockett over Chris Christie and Will Hurd. But other than that, dead wing of the party, non-existent. If you had a competitive Democrat primary on the same ballot as the Republican primary, Trump would have gotten 95% of the vote. But anyways, thank you for watching. Subscribe, become a $5 member if you want to talk with Token Canadian. I love how that's the tagline now. Yeah. Uh, Subscribe, comment, like, share with your friends if you have any. Um, if you don't have any, then I'll be your friend, and then you can share the video with me. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. Tester's done.